Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. All right. I always giggle when I watch that, man. Hey, I'm with a colleague who's become a dear friend, Andy Prisco. Andy, welcome to No Fear Live. How you doing? I'm
doing great. It's great to be here, and I feel very honored by the invitation. Thank you.
Well, it's for people who don't know who Andy is, I'll give a little bit of background because it's funny how he kind of was stalking me on LinkedIn. And I had to get a restraining order against. Just kidding. We started talking on LinkedIn, and he saw something in my research and my system that I'm not going to say I didn't know that it was there, because we've always been, even back to the 80s, about avoiding violence, de-escalating violence, self-control. That's where No Fear came from. That's where, and I didn't have language. This is crazy. Hold on a second here. My computer is recording everything. It's still recording everything here in the chat. Sorry, one sec, guys. Something weird is going on here. Okay, I'll reset that. Before it was fashionable to talk about de-escalation, which really kind of ramped up a lot in the last few years. We were doing that in the 80s. We had nonviolent postures and de-escalation, and we were talking about we didn't have terms like self-regulation and dysregulation and stuff like that. But Andy was following my work vicariously online, and then hit me up and said, "You're onto something." And I'm going to let him talk a little bit about this because he can explain it like no one else. One of the things that there's a few things that I love about Andy, but one of it is his vocabulary, because I've got some pretty big words in my vocabulary, and I like to throw that around to give the illusion that I'm super smart. But when Andy talks, I'm like, I got to have a thesaurus out. I'm like, what did he just say? What did he just say? Externally, my facade is, yes, I know what you're talking about, but he's got a fantastic brain and an ability to articulate specifically for a community, the care and services community, healthcare, in areas where my language, my street cred, from working with military and law enforcement, just doesn't fly. And but what he was able to see was a diamond in the rough, so to speak, although we weren't rough. But the core element of SPEAR and No Fear, which was, how do we control ourselves so we can control a violent encounter or control ourselves? How do we de-escalate? How do we optimize somebody's self-defense potential regardless of their gender or their experience or their age? And he saw that, and he reached out to me and said, there's something here. And that relationship gave birth to SPEAR Care. And of course, CARE is an acronym for Comprehensive Aggression Response Education. And so that whole division, which will probably one day soon eclipse everything we do in law enforcement in terms of need and numbers, because as you all know, a major healthcare issue is forthcoming like a tidal wave.
It's happening now. It's happening right now. It's starting.
Yeah. So why don't, anyways, once again, welcome to the show, and thank you for reaching out on LinkedIn all those years ago. And look.
Yeah. Well, what really brought us together initially was following was bows and arrows. And I had the good fortune of being on the staff of a pro shop and Olympic level coach who owned the pro shop for many, many years and shot competitively and shot all of the equipment configurations and aiming systems. And when I saw on Instagram that you had a real tight group of arrows with whatever setup you were using, it looked like a bare bow setup. I remember us starting on the bow and arrow conversation. And over the course of my life, I've met some of the most fascinating people who were into bows and arrows.
Yeah.
I mean, from an entire spectrum, from people who, were arguably connected to organized crime all the way to people who were working for the FBI. Everybody likes to shoot bows and arrows. Everybody likes to bow hunt where I came from in an urban part of New Jersey, interestingly. But that's what brought us together. And I'm delighted that we have an opportunity to talk about the things that you and I feel passionate about, which is this journey of, let's say, personal transformation toward mastering self and all of the domains in which that can be expressed. And if anybody has probably done the most meaningful work of how that occurs in the psychomotor domain around the highest risk kinds of events that could possibly occur, is you. And in the domain that I come from, which is psychiatric care and services, we have to maintain a relationship with someone after we potentially have to put our hands on them. And we're in a time in our history right now where, between the AI and how partisan things have become and how polarizing things have become, managing the presentation of anger and aggression in other people seems to be a skill set that everybody needs. And historically, that's generally been confined to the emergency services agencies, because people could call 911 and turf the incident to responders. But we don't have that luxury anymore. It's happening in distribution centers of Fortune 500 companies. It's happening in hospitals. It's happening in supported housing programs for people who are serving, people living with homelessness and houselessness. It's happening in mobile crisis environments, co-response. It's happening everywhere. Yeah. So what you've brought to the table, Tony, is, I'd say, probably the most meaningful thing that anybody can do before they have to do anything that is complex. And that is, get your mind in order. Get your mind in order, weather the ambush, ride the startle flinch impulse, whatever it is, whether it's instigated by a sudden stimulus that's physical or a sudden stimulus that's emotional. And after you process that, then you can get into whatever it is. You say, spear's the bridge to your next move. Well, what if your next move is asking someone why they want to punch you in the face because they didn't get the second lunch that they wanted at mealtime, or that they don't want to take a shower. So even parents who are dealing with their own children that live with disabilities or kids on the autistic spectrum benefit so much from this kind of training that we're talking about, these principles.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a situation. Someone else contacted me on LinkedIn that had they weren't married, but they were a couple in their 60s, and the guy's what's the official term if you're not married and you're living together? There's a legal name for that. I forget what it's just called.
Intimate partner.
Yeah, but no, there's some like legal when you're not. I don't remember.
Oh, common law marriage.
Yeah, common law. So his common law wife had a son with a disability, and every so often, the way he would respond is he'd go up to his mom and just squeeze her as hard as he could. I love you, I love you, I love you. But he was a big man, and she was a little woman. And this gentleman who was following me online private messaged me and said, I think you might have something different, like it's not jujitsu, it's not Krav Maga, we're not striking, we're not arm barring, we're not. He said, I'm fearful as she gets older and smaller and weaker, and he's in his like late 20s and he's big. I'm really afraid something's going to happen, and she's afraid. And, you know, do you think you could help? And immediately I saw all the answers.
Yep.
And I had somebody who I know you care for deeply, is Katie, up in her area, one of our top trainers.
Yep.
And I said, Katie, I want you to do a private session for this couple. And I had her whiteboard for me how she thought this one-day private session was going to go for this family. And, you know, she did the classic proof of principle, physiology first, understand how your body works, finger splayed outside 90. And the idea here was that you weren't going to do any striking. It was when this incident happened, it was finger splayed outside 90 and just hold the person, because it lasted about a minute.
Right.
So the idea was if you could weather the impulse for a minute without any striking or violence, this would subside. The episode would conclude, and it'd be like, whoa, that was weird. But there was no violence, or there was no escalation of violence.
Precisely.
And so Katie had this laid out, and then she had, towards the end of the session, cycle of behavior, understanding fear, how to manage fear. And I said, hey, you did a really good job, but I want the whole no fear system to be in the beginning.
Yep.
And she was like, wow, why Coach B? Because we typically don't start off with it in the beginning. And I said to her, and I'm sharing this story with everyone listening and sharing it with you again. I think I told you the story, Andy, but if not, it's interesting. I said, because when you're dealing with defensive tactics trainers or military trainers or martial artists, or even trainers who've gone through the physical restraints training in your industry, there's already like a baseline skill and a theoretical decision. I'm going to do this if I need to. And so the fear management block in that case, like Lego blocks, can be inserted anywhere as long as it's part of the package.
Yep.
With this event, it was a one-off. And I said, you've got a couple who are terrified of the risk. And if they're afraid of the drills and afraid of the scenarios and afraid of the discussion, they can't absorb the value of the information.
That's exactly right.
And I had her move the fear management to the front so that they could clear their fear. And now it's like, this is finger splayed, this is outside 90. And it was amazing how well it went. And I share that with everybody here listening, and whoever gets whoever this podcast is shared with, to understand this is the intuitive approach and organic approach with the whole spear care, verbal craft kind of intersection. And it's looking at groups, whether it's a group of trainers or it's a group of end users or whoever it is, recognizing what the biggest issue is, and then figuring out a comprehensive way to get people. This is the first thing, is they've got to be able to self-regulate, because, and you know, I think this is one of the first things I said to you. Why? So Andy and I'll let you talk about the design of this. Andy and I do like a tandem workshop with his program and our program. And when we can design it, it's always spear care first, and then Andy's ACIT, and I'll let him talk about it after. Because the idea is this: if you're showing somebody psychological, verbal, behavioral strategies to help de-escalate, if that person is exuding fear or is reactive because they're afraid, they can't lean into the strategies that you're teaching. So it was this idea of, if we teach them, hey, you are as safe as you can be. You as a human have hardwired psychological and instinctive and intuitive reflexes that will protect you. You just never been taught this stuff. So how do you convert the startle flinch? How do you de-escalate yourself? Now that you go, and you've done those drills where you go, oh my God, I'm way safer as a result of just literally one day of training. now I can lean into the de-escalation world in a more meaningful way.
Yes. Yes.
So, but tell us. So one thing you said at the beginning when we were talking, and I said the tidal wave of like a mental health crisis is coming. You said it's already here. Do you have any numbers or stats or examples? I know you mentioned different communities, but like any percentages like I mean, I've heard like in certain areas, like I had a hospital contact me and said, hey, we're seeing a 400% increase in, just numbers. Do you have have you come across any numbers?
I've come across a lot of numbers, and I'm dubious about some. And I guess the way that I would feel most comfortable answering that question is, particularly since pandemic, and in some states that are, let's say, subject to a lot of media coverage right now for a number of reasons, many adverse, not good things reporting, bad things getting reported, increases in homelessness, increases in crime. What we're seeing in those states are, let's say, an overdetermined number of claims from a number of domains about the amount of violence that they're dealing with. And it can be in healthcare institutions, it could be in community corrections, it could be in youth and family services, and the interconnectedness of all of it makes it hard, I think, to measure the specific numbers, because you can look at arrests and crime stats, and you can hear lots of people, like particularly political officials, talking about a decrease in a number of arrests, which might cause someone to think that there's less crime. But what's resulting in a reduced number of arrests might have to be more related to public safety recalcitrance, because so often these police agencies feel terribly scrutinized and
Right.
under the gun, so to speak, that they're apprehensive about carrying out their duties. This is not anything new that I'm talking about. So that's what I mean by I'm dubious sometimes about the statistics. But
Yeah, I get it.
It's been my observation, Tony, that workforces in massive droves are experiencing workforce churn, high overtime, use of unscheduled leave, because of challenges presented by people served. And when we look at in even the large Fortune 500 corporations, organizations, I won't name them, that have been standing up inward-facing workplace violence prevention, workplace wellness initiatives, where internally they will respond first to an employee behavioral emergency before resorting to the 911 system or the 988 system. Large employers are recognizing that not only is there an uptick in these events, but they better develop capacity to manage them themselves, because they can't just farm it out to the phone anymore, 911 or 988. So it's the thing that has brought you and me together is, let's say, these phone calls that we're getting from youth and family services organizations, where they're providing care and services to a family where someone in there is living with disabilities or serious mental illness or serious emotional disturbances, and there is the presentation of violence in the kid. And the care and services staff want to deal with that and reduce the likelihood of future emergency, so the kid doesn't come into contact with the justice system, so the kid doesn't have a life that has been, blotted out by charges and crime, and have to fight their way through that. The other interesting domain that's opening up tremendously for the kind of work we do are people who are re-entering community from carceral systems, and their need to navigate through life with an ability to regulate themselves, to bring new skills to the table if they're met with hostility, just because they've come out of prison or come out of jail. And if they have a problem with an employer, and if the employer shows some kind of bias or untoward behavior for them because of their background, and they're just trying to make it, they need to be able to manage those situations effectively. And all of this comes down to, you had mentioned before, the family that Katie had worked with. So I have a deep experience in environments where we mechanically restrain, manually restrain, or chemically restrain people that present anger, aggression, and mental health symptoms like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, acute care psychiatric admissions. And when someone presents dyscontrol, a very perfunctory kind of systematic response is acquire manual control of them, escort them to a place where they can be mechanically restrained to a bed, or they're a beneficiary of some kind of cocktail. We call it the B52 in the parlance, which is Haldol, Benadryl, Ativan. And that's to reduce the amount of either mania or crisis that the person is experiencing physically. These events occur hundreds of times a week in many, 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 many places. And if you're watching this in the world, somewhere there is a psychiatric care and services environment near you, or a facility near you where this is happening. And what we learned, Tony, in my domain is that when you push down on the use of control, when you push down on the use of mechanical restraint, manual restraint, and seclusion in managing the presentation of those behaviors, the fear that violence is going to increase is not true. That's not the data. When you push down on the control measures, the events actually decrease. That's the data. So when you stop mechanical restraint and seclusion, manual holding always goes up, but it never transitions past it. So like you just said, the 60 seconds that those parents or grandparents had to manage, just manage the loved one who was in an episode that would eventually run its course.
Correct.
And then recognize that we can maintain relationship after this. We can be with you to contain you in a therapeutic way until you're through this period, and you can potentially re-engage your capacity for self-regulation. We learn that happens. That's when people start engaging a new capacity to regulate themselves. Because the second, third, and fourth order consequences, the externalities, as the intellectuals say, the externalities of constant force in managing the presentation of challenging behavior doesn't change the behavior for the better, ever. There's no research that it does that. There's no school of thought that says restrain people more so the discomfort will be so unpalatable that they'll actively choose a new way of engaging the world. That doesn't happen. We tried that in the 19th century at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, where the entire facility was architecturally designed to instill penitence. Isolation for everybody, no human contact, you're alone. If you come out of the cell, you have a hood. If you try to talk to someone else, you get punished. That lasted just a few years. And because the intent was meaningful. They wanted to build a prison that was so dark that someone would say, I don't want to go back there. My life has changed. But if you live with chronic behaviors and mental illness, it doesn't work. So now our carceral systems are based on the New York model, the congregate setting. People are together. But anyway, I don't know if I covered the question.
You didn't at all, not even. But no, it's fascinating to me because it's counterintuitive. Of course, my audience is, and hopefully we have a lot of your audience in here because you're well known within your industry and communities. My audience is mostly law enforcement, military, public safety, and in the last couple of years, the kindler, gentler, you got to learn this, you got to do this, de-escalation, that, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot more exposures. And of course, public safety has had to liaise with healthcare and hospital staff, for years. But it's interesting, as a joke I always make, like in the defensive tactics world, that firearms instructors and the hand-to-hand guys don't communicate. They don't even like each other. It's like, hey, we do this, you do that. And I'm going, wait a minute. Like, the altercation always involves both considerations. And if you guys communicated, you might come up with something better or have a different understanding. And so you made me think of a bunch of things there. You go to a mechanical restraint course, and now suddenly it's like, as the metaphor goes, you're now certified in hammer, and the person who's having an episode is the nail, and and everything is this. And it's counterintuitive, but fascinating. And people who are listening to this need to rewind and listen to Andy's kind of rant on that. Is, you would think if I grabbed you and held you, that I stopped talking, and it's not because I'm a loss of words, because I just remembered a fight that I got into in university. There might be adult beverages involved there, I don't remember, but I was 20 years old. I was at York University in Toronto, and I got in a fight with a guy in a room next door to me, and it escalated, and he shoved me and stuck his hand in front of my face, and he was 6'2", 3". I'm close to 6 feet. I'm really just 5'8", but I exaggerate. But I'm 5'8", so he's like this. And now at the time, I hadn't developed spear or my whole system. And as a kickboxer, boxer, striker, I'm like, shit, I can't, how am I going to punch him in the face? We're buzzed and we're going to get in a fight. And I remembered, about a nerve cluster I've been messing around with on this little kind of like curve at the back of the hand. And he's pointed like this. I put my hands up in a nonviolent posture, Andy, and I hook punch his hand. Totally unexpected. This become CWCT, close to weapon, close target. I hook punch his hand. It cracks his hand around. He goes, his hand's up like this. And I go and I grab the wrist, mechanical restraint, yank him to the ground, spin him. He's proned out. I fold his arm around his back. And you remember in Bruce Lee's Return of the Dragon, where he knocks the guy out, and then he's sitting in behind the restaurant, and he's sitting on the guy's ass with his hands like this.
Yeah.
I sit on this guy's ass. He's proned out, and I've got his arm chicken winged up behind him, holding his hand like this. And he's on the ground going, I'm going to fucking kill you. I'm going to fucking kill you. And I say to him, I go, hey, I know you don't have eyes. I literally said this. I know you don't have eyes in the back of your head, but try to visualize what's happening now. You're on your stomach. You can't move. I've got this restraint on you, and I could break your wrist if I do this. And I increase a little power. And he goes, oh. And he relaxes for a second. And I go, I could also just drive your hand up towards your head like this, and I slide it up. And what that'll do is that'll either break your elbow or your shoulder, whichever one goes first. And he feels the pain. And he goes, oh, he says, okay, let me up. I said, well, I'm not sure I believe you. Are you sure we're okay if I let you up? I think I've demonstrated that I don't want to hurt you. And he goes, yeah, let me up. And I say, okay. And I start to back off. And while I'm backing off, he goes, I'm going to fucking kill you. And he starts.
Yeah.
And I literally did this for about 3 or 4 minutes, up and down, where he had to. Now, he eventually exhausted himself out and realized, but it was minutes. And here's what people don't understand. And I'm sorry for hijacking the conversation, because I just had this flashback to this. Everyone listening, mechanical restraints don't work if there's no pain. If there's no pain, you snap my arm. You if the guy has some sort of I don't know what the term was. He doesn't feel pain. He doesn't have that. Then the arm just breaks and the fight continues. And I've seen that happen in violence, where whatever drugs the person's on, this happens to their knee at their elbow, but they're still there. And everyone's like, whoa. Mechanical restraints only work because of the pain that allows you to put the person while they go, and put them into a position where they can't move fluidly. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you put somebody in pain is you release every neurochemical that makes them stronger and more angry.
Right.
And it's it's like you're trying to stop a flood and then somebody else is opening another part.
Right.
And so
That's exactly right. And you've described the phenomena that it is so intuitive that it's only training that seems to elucidate or lead someone to a new conclusion about it, because the desire or the impulse for survival, as you point out and many, many others point out in their respective domains, is automatic. We're not able to turn that off. And just as you said, the involuntary functions that occur when that system is activated, if you're not in a level of awareness where that needs to be managed so you can get to wider diversity of thought and expression, that's always the reaction when someone is restrained against their will and we start to release them, unless we are trying to stimulate in the hold, like you were trying to with this person. We're trying to stimulate function in the neocortex, wider diversity of thought area of the brain, to cause them to want to not resist.
Self-regulate.
Which we need to engage them to stimulate that, because if we don't try to stimulate it, what will naturally occur is the fight when we begin to release pressure, because their limbic system is activated, which is why it takes skill and effort, truly, to lead someone to de-escalate themselves. That's really what de-escalation is.
Yeah.
Is the business of influencing someone to engage their own capacity to de-escalate themselves, both neurobiologically, psychologically, and physically. And that's not for the faint of heart.
It's well said, but very, very, I don't know if esoteric's the right word, because it's like to get really good at, let's say, jujitsu as an example, and use it in a truly violent encounter. You got to be very calm and really good. And some people might argue, like obviously it depends on the scenario, but there's an interesting thing in the communities that you're best known for and have graciously invited, our system into. There's something I talk about every time we have a discovery call with a potential organization or client, where I talk about the Hippocratic essence of everyone in this community is do no harm. And so somebody gravitates to this do no harm world where I want to help. And then we say, here's a good way to drop an elbow on somebody's head, and here's a headbutt, and they're going, whoa, hold on a second.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the serendipitous elements of our system is there's no pain-inducing mechanical restraint.
It's the best part. It's the best part because it lends itself to workforce safety and safety of the person served better than any other way. And
I want you to interrupt here, because you did a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago where you very humbly described some of your experience in very intense violent encounters, but also that you not only participated in every mechanical restraint course, you also trained it and got to the point where you were an instructor at a state level.
Right.
And then discovered SPEAR. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people need to hear that.
Yeah. You have your ways of saying it, and I'll touch on those so that people who know you can make the connections. In the healthcare domain, whether it's medical hospitals or psychiatric hospitals, residential treatment centers, both, involuntary and even partial care, the workforce, generally speaking, under the law, have to undergo some kind of physical skills training that gets bundled with de-escalation training. So I won't name the other packages, but I've been through an extensive number of them, and they pretty much all carry the same algorithm. They present the class with some basic ideas anchored in behavioral health, trauma-informed care, active listening, reflection statements, then some diagrams about a crisis cycle, which regard the person served, not you as the practitioner, but what the person served is going through.
Can I put my hand up and I'm going to interrupt here because I never heard you describe it like this. But, and I think this is where you're going, or you're very aware of it. When people train with us, our neural circuitry of fear, our diagrams are about you.
Yeah.
So you can self-regulate and make the most meaningful choice. But
that's ahead. My point. That's the thing. That's why your stuff is the best, because everybody else's
it's their fault.
So you go to the diagram, then after you get some familiarity in that, you engage in a bunch of, let's say, modulated or revised defensive tactics that are safe for healthcare, all of which are complex motor skill, all of which are not easy to do, and carried out by people whose duties largely will not be that. So you get a couple of hours in some managing bites, managing grabs, escort positions. Everybody's got their version of what that is. Then to graduate the training, you demonstrate the physical skills, and then your employer has checked off that you've taken a de-escalation training. It is probably the most bewildering thing I have ever seen in educating a workforce to assist someone in engaging their own capacity to self-regulate. And the magic of what you had been doing and did not see the connection to the healthcare space as deeply as you do now is that you say it this way: all those other systems are training packages for the fight that starts 2 seconds after the fight really started. Right. So what happens is a workforce will acquire one of these training packages, provide it, and then the violence metrics don't change.
Right.
Because people have been trained for a couple of hours in a complex motor skill. They get ambushed. Then there's critical review of the incident from the video. And then the staff member is chastised because they didn't do the complex motor skill that they learned in the 2-day training, of which only 3 hours was allocated to the physical skills portion. And now the employee is on reassignment. Nobody wants to say this was a bad idea with the training package because somebody's name was attached to dumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into it, and they're not going to own the dignity smearing value of that. And nobody will say anything about the training, and the training will continue and the events will continue. And that's the nonsense that can go on.
So you're familiar with this slide, of course, and what Andy's talking about, we call it the Star Trek model in our more aggressive defensive tactics or self-defense, where most systems, all these other mechanical systems, they started D3, and it was Bob Willis, a very famous police officer, expert witness, now retired, who watched me teach a course in 1995 at ACIT, the American Society of Law Enforcement Trainers. He said, you teach the 2 seconds before the fight everyone else teaches. And this is, you know, if you think Minority Report, right? Remember
right.
the movie, right? So what we teach is pre-fight, right? It's like, how do I, if we go back to this is where this whole D1, D2, nobody's teaching. They're saying, like, here's how you get over headlock. Here's how you stop a bite, but you start the drill with the bite. You start the drill with the headlock. And the moves might be great, but this is why, and to again, paraphrase what Andy said, you get all these training packages, you get certified, and then not only do the numbers not go down, nobody's asking, how is it that we're all certified or qualified? And the numbers didn't go down because there's no training or education in D1, D2, detect and avoid, and diffuse and de-escalate. So
you said it better than I could. And listen, there's the event itself and how it's managed. And then there are the externalities of that. When you're a parent, you have to maintain a relationship with your youngster because you're leading and guiding them. And if they live with disabilities, it's very, very likely, depending upon the disability, that the manner in which the kid engages the world is going to result in the presentation of some kind of aggression and violence. If this were your own kid, would you be applying all these wrist locks and joint locks? Of course you wouldn't. You'd be trying to manage. You say it this way: the force must parallel the danger. We have a habit in care of services of the danger being observed and the force going way beyond it in the management of it. And what you have brought to bear through your approach, and what I think our collaboration has fleshed out in the narrative sense, you prepare the student to manage whatever it is and to have the presence of mind, if the force goes up, to go with it or to exit, as opposed to just being a victim of it, and as opposed to the idea of some kind of, let's say, binary relationship. When you do this, this will be the level of force that will suppress you. Like, the jury is back and the data is back on that. Suppression of undesirable behavior, suppression of it does not make the behavior go away, ever.
There's a couple of factors. I got to interrupt here because I want it captured on video, because we got to talk about this and create some graphics for the communities we serve. And one of them is this: when you've got a mechanical restraint, let's just talk about psychology and biomechanics. When you have a mechanical restraint, you need to use, in most cases, both of your limbs to affect that, which means you're not protected from a headbutt, from a bite, from another threat. It could be a parent that goes, "Get off my kid," or somebody else there. The mechanical restraint only works, like, if you're going to do something with the arm and the elbow, you need to hit, I'm just using this arm bar example, the Golgi tendon, which is about an inch above the elbow. If you're 3/4 of an inch or an inch and a quarter, it doesn't work. The specificity required for mechanical restraint to work is exacting. And if you can't do it, it's not going to work, which means things are out of control and escalating.
It's a mess.
And if you're flinching while you're trying to restrain somebody, the cross extension chain is going to lock down. You can't protect yourself. You're locked in. Number one, we could rant on that forever. The other thing is this, and again, I just want to get this so we can talk about it later, is if I apply a mechanical restraint, nobody likes to be suppressed physically.
Oh, God.
Like, you grab a cat or a dog that's hurt and try and hold them. You grab a toddler having a tantrum and you try to hold them. They flail more. They freak more. It's a suffocation effect, and they can't. And we had a maxim. I used to say this back in the 80s, Andy, that no one can sustain an adrenaline dump by themselves. That for them to escalate, you need to be fanning the flames. Now, I was talking about the de-escalation part, but it also is the same thing like the story I told you in university, where I'm sitting on the guy. That was embarrassing. I was taunting him, even though I was being polite. And I was injecting a little bit of pain to show him that I was ultimately in charge. And that was pissing him off at every level.
Oh, yeah. Tony, let me quickly clarify something for anyone who's listening, because I want to make sure that your consciousness is also sensitive to this. What you're describing as mechanical restraint is essentially the utilization of mechanical advantage or leverage in the physical manipulation of a body part. Mechanical restraint in the care and services setting are generally equipment.
Right.
So think of, just for a moment, the complex motor skill required to place wristlets, hobbles, and a waist belt on someone while they're fighting with keys, and then while they're still fighting, transition them to a med sled because you can't drag them, and then you have to slide them across the floor while they're fighting, and then transition them out of the sled onto a restraint bed. This enterprise, this effort does not take place in 30 seconds. This enterprise can be up to 15 or 20 minutes of completely traumatizing and damaging another human being when we are putting the gas on the fire of their limbic system in what we think needs to happen here. And I am not a type of person that goes around saying, and I am friends with people who want to end seclusion and restraint. I love their message. The way that I would distinguish my worldview from it is that I have seen and participated in more of those than I can count or remember. There were occasions where it was necessary. I've been in them. I've lived them. I've been involved in countless more that were unnecessary. Right. They were ordered, or they became necessary because the response was insensitive to these principles that we are discussing, and we actually escalated someone instead of de-escalated them. Then we created the fight. Then we had to do something. So,
I mean, that ties back to, again, our relationship is, if you can't manage the fear, you can't manage the confrontation. So the fear happens in you, in us, the person who's trying to de-escalate. So we need to manage the fear. So there's a psychological way to do that. And that's, of course, in our cycle of behavior, which you're intimate with and Phil, and everyone on this call has seen this.
Yeah,
right?
It's like a circuit board. Yeah.
Right. And you know, it's a fascinating thing. And using the circuit board metaphor, which was first shared to me after 9/11, when FedEx hired me to design a program for their pilots. And I showed them this. And one of the pilots said, "This looks like an electrical circuit board." And I went, I never thought about it. And that became where I would, you know, like sub label this as the neural circuitry of fear. And the metaphor was, if you blow a fuse anywhere along the way, you disempower yourself. And so that was a neat thing. If people got it as a little internal light bulb moment. But the what was missing, or what is missing in most systems, and this goes for not just the community that Andy specializes in, but in most systems, I don't care if you're a professional boxer, your coach isn't sitting down and talking about the neural circuitry of fear and how emotional psychological fear can weigh on your mind in a way that doesn't allow you to hit a flow state so that you win the title or win your fight. It's everywhere. Fear throttles everything we do. And as I like to say, from who we talk to, therefore, who do you marry and who are your friends? Fear influences, you know, your fitness, your finances, where you live. Look at the last few years. You because of how you managed fear, and I'm not going to get into details, you were in the last few years asked to make certain decisions because of fear. And by managing fear, you know, your career path changed, even though you're in the same area. So it's fascinating, you know, for everybody.
Yeah.
When you manage your fear, you manage your mind, and you change your day, you change your week, you change your life by managing fear.
And what we do in de-escalation, Tony, and the utility of spear care, and what we do with advanced crisis intervention training, and is our approach is to help others in managing their fear in the moment. And that means being able to and having a capacity to manage the presentation of risk that they are going to produce to us in the service of something far greater, to reduce the second, third, and fourth order consequences. Yeah. Because if we, and which is the story of care and services, when you think about asylums or sanitariums 150 years ago, the presentation of crisis was pretty much unidimensionally met one way: isolation. And if you speak to anybody who's worked in corrections for any period of time, the use of isolation remains to this day, in some cases very necessarily, in other cases by their own admission, potentially overutilized, that this still goes on. The storyline of managing the presentation of challenging behavior in human beings is a journey of moving away from control and towards support. The more that we move towards support, the more that we reduce the likelihood of future emergency. The more that we move towards support, the more that people in the space who have to intervene have to use different tactics other than control. That means whatever the enterprise is going to take longer than control. So if someone went into crisis in the congregate setting 150 years ago, they were generally met with 3 or 4 people who would assume risk, acquire manual control, remove from the congregate setting, isolate. At some point, that person comes back out. They go back into crisis. This happens again. This will continue to happen until the presentation is met with different tactics. Those different tactics invariably take longer than to acquire control and isolate. But think of the risk computations between engaging in physical control of another human being every day and the risk that that presents you based on frequency and intensity, and the risk associated with trying to lead someone to a capacity to regulate themselves. Harder to do, takes longer to do, reduces the externalities, and you help make the world a better place. And yes, in the simplest terms, which intervention has the most potential to preserve relationship after the event? If you don't care about the other human being, I guess you could argue, well, I controlled it because I don't have to maintain a relationship with this person. I don't know if people are paying attention, but our world's falling apart.
Yeah.
We better get some relationship back in the game. So if there's an opportunity, a method, a way that people can navigate their own startle, flinch, impulse kinesiology and engage in a method to help lead someone to a greater state of regulation, you make the world a better place. This was the whole point of crisis negotiation and law enforcement. Friends of mine, Gary Nesner, Jack Cambria, Scott Tillema, these are people who are out there providing education about how this works in those settings.
Right.
It's the same principles.
It's so profound and it's so big. And at the end of the day, a couple of things. There was a drill I did the first time I did this was in Australia years ago with a bunch of law enforcement, and we were doing some knife defense. Somebody had accessed like a shank as something you could stab with, right? So this could be, you could be in a home visit, you could be in a correctional setting, someone's got something they're trying to stab you. And the drill was to teach people about the clear control counter methodology, our 3 C's when somebody has a weapon. But what everyone wanted to do was hammer the attack. Everyone wanted to go to the manual control. And I was messing up earlier, and I'm glad you brought it up. I was saying mechanical when I meant manual. But manual has to happen before mechanical. You can't snap your fingers. You're not gonna put any piece of equipment on somebody if they're flailing on you. You got to manually control them. And to your point, here's another thing that I don't know has been brought up or thought about. But if this happens to you once, we have a maxim in our scenario training courses that it goes like this: everything works once, it doesn't work twice. And we're talking about in scenario training, if I do something with a role player and I do a move and then we do the scenario again to get a rep in, that same move won't work the same way, either because of some sort of instantaneous stress inoculation, my endorphins and my adrenaline,
right, or the training bias, as you say.
So what's interesting about this idea of creating something that takes a little bit longer, if we go back to what I said about you can't sustain adrenaline dump by yourself. if I've grabbed your arm and I've got you in this position here, and you try to bite me and I twist you, and I say, calm down, or my favorite, relax, right? I always say, never tell another person to relax unless you're a massage therapist or a chiropractor. Otherwise,
it happens in healthcare. It happens. It's the most counterintuitive thing that is.
Stop struggling, right? Like,
come on, stop resisting. Yeah, okay.
Why didn't you say so? Okay, But here's the thing we don't realize is while you're caught, pain drops adrenaline into the system and it makes people angry, and it's all messed up. So what was the thing about the neat thing, and there's a few people on this call that have trained with us, and they understand the whole SPEAR, spontaneous protection enabling accelerated response, of the conversion of the startle response into a protective countermeasure is a primal gross motor skill, which means it works when you're scared, it works when you're surprised, and if you get a little bit good at it, which really takes about a day, it works when you do it on purpose. And so I can be in a position where I'm not striking a person, I'm controlling their movement. If they escalate and my safety is compromised, I still have options.
Yep.
And if I'm holding them off for what is usually about 20 to 30 to 40 seconds, I don't know why I keep hitting a button here on my desk. If they start to self-regulate because they're gassing out, we're not inflicting pain, we're calmer, there's language, there's language from the advanced crisis intervention program that you're saying, they begin to self-regulate. And I was telling you about this Australian event where the role player would come at them with a knife and everyone wanted to immediately like straight punch, grab, break a wrist. And I said, no, I need you to learn to be calm in the eye of the storm, self-regulate, fear management, see things. And they couldn't get it. And here's what I said to them, Andy. This is going back, like, Nicky, my boy is 32 now. He was like, I think 4 years old, our first trip. So this is going back almost 30 years. 30 years. I said, I want you to pretend the most important person in your life has been injected with some sort of serum where for 1 minute, they're going to try and kill you. 1 minute, they're going to try and kill you. And then you know this for a fact. In 1 minute, they're going to stop. You're going to be white as a ghost, sweating. They're going to drop the knife and go, Dad, Mom, why are you sweating? They won't even have any recall. And when I told them that, I said, this is what I want you to remember. For 1 minute, this person's going to try and kill you, and then it's going to stop.
And then you got to go eat lunch with them.
Right. Would you be shooting them, gouging their eyes, headbutting? This is your daughter. This is your son. This is your wife. So it's really interesting how this all...
Tony, let me throw this in.
Yeah.
So, I love working with Chief and Katie on your team, and we're together when they're in this area and a lot. And so when we engage in some of the graduating exercises before the end of the training, where we're bringing the very methodological verbal de-escalation skills together with the physical skills and creating some opportunities for people to feel simulated conditions, people will be in the spear posture saying things to the other person like, you're a strong man. I know you're a strong man. I know you're angry. Let's try to figure this out a different way and we can get your need met, while they're moving around in the room. And there are going to be people who are listening to that who are saying, that don't work. Listen, I was in one of the most violent places in the nation to work at, where we were doing mechanical restraints on people hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a week, tying people to beds, dragging them across the floor, secluding them every 5 minutes. This went on more than what goes on in most people's careers in a week. And this is the daily. We brought that down to nearly negligible levels by engaging in postures when necessary and still delivering validation statements to people as they were angry, to try to jumpstart, no pun intended, their executive function and to get them to think about something else. And the beauty of your entire package is that airbag, that shield, only becomes uncomfortable to another human being when they press into it. The practitioner isn't the source of the pain. If this is my shield, the more you press into this, the more it's going to hurt. The less you do, maybe you'll think of an alternative. And that seems to capture the attention of students and employers who are, let's say they have a hands-off policy. You and I both know a number of organizations we serve. We don't have a restraint policy. Well, guess what? This isn't restraint.
Right.
This is the employee engaging a physical posture that's completely natural and defendable and morally and ethically responsible, because no workforce can expect their employees to be bludgeoned. We have to give them something. We're going to give them the best thing in the world they can give them. And if a person served experiences discomfort or makes some claim as a result of the posture, it's because they're leaning into it with a desire to do more harm, not because the posture is the source of the discomfort.
I love it. I love it. Hey, we're on the hour. I want to be mindful and respectful of your time, and we'll have you back on again. I just want to see if there's any questions from the group, but there are only a couple of comments. We got one. I love this one only because from Sarah Marie.
She's so good.
Yeah. So I appreciate that, and what Andy saw in our program. I can't thank him enough for bringing this to your community, hospital, healthcare.
Yeah, Sarah's great. She's a nurse too, skilled one.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, like, a lot of people listening, of course, are law enforcement, retired law enforcement, military, retired military. When you train with me and my team and you learn SPEAR and you use any aspect of it, from the de-escalation, defuse strategies, to the avoidance strategies, to elements of no fear, to the actual SPEAR as a tactic, I expect you to do that, right? And this is something I alluded to earlier. When you're coming at managing violence from the Hippocratic side, it's totally foreign. It's like, you're a doctor, you're a nurse in the hospital. I go, okay, guys, great work last week. Tomorrow we're going to teach you, how to fight in the back of an ambulance. Like we have an EMS course coming up in Texas, right? And part of you is going, whoa. Now we recognize that stuff is going on, and we think it happens elsewhere, but you need to be able to protect yourself. And we got a question here from Jack.
Hey, Jack.
So do we have any plans to bring SPEAR Care online or Zoom type teaching platform? Both of you are icons in the field. Thanks, Jack. I'll go first. There are parts of the program we absolutely could do online. I think that we should talk about doing something through Jumpstart, because you've got a
community
there, and we could definitely do some stuff. But we haven't. It's a good idea, Jack. We haven't really talked about it because we're kind of busy with the live in-person stuff, and there's elements like the drill that Andy described at the end, which I actually had goosebumps when you're describing it, because I can see, the primal gross motor is so congruent with the fear state of pushing away danger that the talking, my internal dialogue, and me choosing choice speech that was learned in Andy's program, it just makes sense. It's just easy to do.
Yes. Yeah. Jack is so brilliant. It's so nice of him to ask that. I'll follow your lead on the availability of the content online, but Jack already knows that in the Jumpstart community, much of what we do in the personal training delivery, on-site training delivery, is available online in both live training and digital format, self-paced learning. So,
and to me, it all starts with, it's something that I figured out in the 80s, watching people doing our scenarios, doing our Fight Club before Fight Club was a movie. where we would do these force on force altercations. And I noticed that it wasn't like the big guy with cauliflower ears that did really well always, that if fear overtook anybody, they panicked, they rolled over, they tapped out, they ran away, and they weren't able to deploy any of the force must parallel danger skill sets because they were themselves, and I'm using your terminology, dysregulated. They were reactive, reactive brain, limbic system, amygdala hijack, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
So it became, the line is, only those who manage their fear manage the fight.
It's a brilliant line. And listen, workforces now are experiencing, it's been referred to as the Great Resignation. Human services workforces are in desperate need of this kind of education. The acuity, the challenges that people served are presenting to workforces is upticking. It's increasing for a number of reasons. And the notion that physical skills training or control tactics is going to make that better is not anchored in reality or research. It won't. It's going to make things worse if that's the prevailing model. The only way that we can, let's say, reduce these events that are occurring is for our interventions to be driven by the principle that the question, is this going to reduce the likelihood of future emergency by how I intervene now? And that question was actually penned by our friend, Tony, Dr. Kevin Huckshorn. That's the fundamental goal of the mental health crisis guidelines of SAMHSA. Does the intervention reduce the likelihood of future emergency? If it doesn't, it's not a good intervention.
I'd like to add something. I love that line, but I want to make it more personal.
Yep.
I believe that, with the exception of certain personality types, that when the employee, when the person responsible for the de-escalation experiences the violence, that there are levels of PTSD, and the attrition rate in the community is going to be almost as catastrophic to safety as like if the events were just occurring. So
58%, Tony, the referrals to EAP in some of our correction systems across the country are
EAP?
Employee Assistance Program. So someone at work is having difficulty. They're not showing up. They're snapping off to others. They get into a little bit of a, let's say, a jam, and the employer recognizes this is not characteristic of this employee's history. They must have some things going on. So HR meets with the employee and hands them a packet. And the packet is essentially the provision of free services that are subsidized by the federal government for counseling, EMDR, etc. But it has a lifespan to it. It's limited. Our referrals for those programs and care and services now are very, very high for the very reasons you just described. So
Great.
What if we equip them with the initiatives and the training and the education to better manage a transforming work site? Our people are going to be managing more acuity, more danger, more risk. The notion of farming that out to 911 and 988 is not practical anymore. And that doesn't mean I'm not supportive of calling for help.
Sure.
But that's minutes away. Minutes. You have to be able to do something right now.
Where are you living that it's minutes? It's way
Right.
longer for a lot of people. But I always make the joke, and it's not funny, but it's I say it's a joke, but it's not funny. But a sudden violent encounter, you don't even time to dial 9 on 911.
No, it just happens. And it happens in our supported housing programs every day. It happens in care and services every day. Improvised weapons, punching glass, breaking out windows, contraband. Things are happening every day, every hour, every minute. That could be a phone call.
The other thing with that, and I want everyone listening, if you are in public safety in any capacity, care and services, hospital, EMS, behavioral health, anything, please share this talk and expose them to Andy's work. And message, because nobody describes it or explains it the way you do, Andy. Certainly a gift the way you articulate. But the thing that you were just talking about there, even if you, and I make this joke, again, not a joke, but if you were trying to de-escalate somebody and you were like this, where's my, look at me, I can't even, if Andy was attacking me now, I'm like, I couldn't even find my phone's not open on phone. So now I got to go, Andy, calm down.
Yeah.
Andy, I need you to just relax, Randy. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Like tell me when I can attack you. You don't even have time to dial 911. If you were holding your phone, you don't have time to dial. Now, what we want—
Tony, let me just shoot this in. What if I wanted your attention? I wanted to talk to you. I really didn't want to hurt you. And that's how I get met.
Right.
You're afraid of me. I'm not even at my message yet. You're looking at your phone calling 911. What is that doing in the moment to me? Like, because as you were doing that, I was feeling irritated. Like, man, I just want to get some yard time for a few minutes.
Let's take this one step deeper. This has never happened to any of us, but everyone listening, have you ever been at lunch or dinner with somebody and while you're talking to them, they're doing this? And that pisses you off because they're not giving you respect for your time and your presence. And you, for the most part, are what would be classified as mentally stable. And it's irritating you.
It's terribly irritating. It's dismissive. It's non-validating.
What were you saying?
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the example we give in our own classes about what's not validation. And imagine being met that way by a care provider. And it happens.
And here's how subtle this is. And where I was going with that is you should be able to, when it's safe, to hit a button that's triggering 911 or hit 911, but you know the cavalry's on its way, but can you still protect yourself waiting for the cavalry? You need both skill sets.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. And I'm in. I'm in for the challenge of this transformation because it's needed. It helps the lives of people who want to be in the care and services domain, or even if they're in a law enforcement domain and they have a caring disposition.
Bruno just popped this in here.
Yeah, Bruno's such a good, he's so intelligent, Bruno.
Come on, don't let that go to his head. I got to work with him.
He is. He's articulate too.
Yeah. And he can move. He's got all the skills. So he's one of my main guys in
good deal, Bruno.
Andy and I will figure out some stuff. The good thing is, and the cool thing is, the no fear part of this, which I think is the underpinning for all other skill sets, is available
it's
online.
The concrete. It's the foundation. It's like you come over with that flow device and you just
and
pouring a foundation. That's the no fear.
Andy and I will work on a specific no fear presentation that'll be available for training. And ultimately, I always make this joke in our tactical garage gym training online that people who don't think they could learn on Zoom or Teams or whatever, that if that's the case, either you're not coachable or your instructor sucks, right? But if someone's got meaningful information and they are passionate and researched,
and they're credible, they have to be credible.
You will learn, but you got to be coachable. So we will absolutely figure out a way to bring no fear infused with, and it'll probably be a two-part thing, like we do almost replicating in the live classes, where there's a no fear block, and then they get into the ACIT program.
Yeah.
Where okay, now that you know that, but the ultimate expression, like I say, I can teach somebody how to swim on Zoom. I can teach them how to not drown on Zoom, but at some point, you got to ask yourself, well, there's a pool. Should I jump in and find out if what I learned at some point, doing stuff 3-dimensionally with another person, it would be extremely valuable, because it's going to happen.
Yep.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
I wanted to see, there was another thing here. This is also an interesting idea. We haven't talked about school systems.
Oh, Matthew, thank you so much for that. I'll give a plug for my friend, Guy Stevens at the End Seclusion and Restraint Alliance. We have a terrible problem in our schools, public school systems, of the use of seclusion in managing kids. And I love school. I loved school as a kid. I loved being an active parent in the school of my own children. School is absolutely, fundamentally the least appropriate place for a seclusion room, quiet room to exist. It is absolutely the least appropriate place for practices that isolate children with disabilities and special needs. And the faster we can end all of that in schools, the better. So thank you for that comment, Matthew, because you're 100% right. Our teachers are in desperate need of skills to manage the presentation of challenging behaviors with kids who present special needs. And in the absence of that training and in that knowledge, they resort to what they know. And what they know is control. And what they know is grabbing a kid when they're not cooperating with instructions out of a desk, and people showing up in uniform, physically moving someone against their will. And adverse events occur, and body cam footage shows up, and news media gets attention. The attention of that event gets on the news media. And all of that can be avoided. All of it, as far as I'm concerned.
The another part I would also add, and that's specific to special education needs, the schools, like society, are out of control. We use so many videos of people just sucker punching teachers being attacked, and teachers have no idea what a nonviolent posture is. They have no idea
what they can do to prevent being hurt.
And some of these, like you see, like smartphone recordings of altercations, posturing, puffing chest, both, like it's just a disaster. And schools,
it is
too.
It is, and there's no, at least in healthcare, you have some regulations around that. And most of these other domains, there are none. So, there's no physician overseeing the administration of seclusion. There's no registered nurse that has any deep experience secluding and restraining people in schools. And that's not a dig at the nurses, but I don't know how many psychiatric nurses choose to work in an educational system. So the nurse that's there really doesn't have a lot of hours behind them of doing that, unless it's in the school.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me,
Not a question, but a nice comment from Devin.
Hey, Devin.
Thank you. Thank you, Devin. Devin,
yeah.
I don't know if he's still in the military, but thank you for your service.
He is. I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago from the hangar. He's still up there.
Nice. Let me see this. What did Michael say? More of a comment. So I'll read this because some people only listen to the audio. I keep forgetting that this is video. Michael says, I believe that it's only when you work in different environments for different reasons that you really learn the importance of not engaging in physically violent techniques. 100%. I've said this for a long time. When people ask me about our system, and I get asked this, I've been asked this 100 and 200 times, what's the best martial art for the street? And I always say artist for a museum. What are we talking about here? But what somebody's asking, if I say to you, describe a self-defense scenario, 99.9% of the people will describe something physical. People don't think about de-escalation. People don't think about avoidance. They don't think about the timeline of violence and the D1 and the D2 element. So we go back to this, and I'll just pop this out here so people can see that. And if I say to any, and I've done this as a social experiment, folks, I go, describe a self-defense situation that you were once in. And so, well, someone tried to punch me, or I had to get out of a headlock, or someone stuck a gun in my face, or it's always physical. If you Google the definition of self-defense in the dictionary, most definitions will say something to the effect of the physical act of defending your property or your life. Even the worldwide definition doesn't include D1 or D2 and avoidance.
But what's your definition, Tony? Because it's brilliant.
The decision to choose safety when danger is imminent.
And that's a whole spectrum of options and skills that could really get to a meaningful goal of personal safety.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's not unidimensional.
Yeah. And I love that, because the when I sat down and said, okay, we need to redefine self-defense, because if you understand the umbrella principle is like, my protective umbrella is to choose safety, then every decision I make, and that could mean, and I say this, not, like if you're in an active shooter event, the safest thing might be to charge the threat, which is counterintuitive, because from an impulse point of view, it's to get the hell out of there.
Right.
Depending on proxemics and where you are and where your family is and who you're with, the safest thing might be to charge the attacker. And it's counterintuitive, but like you said, the choose safety model, when danger is imminent, the decision to choose safety must prevail. I now need to decide, should I barricade? Should I avoid? Should I de-escalate? Should I charge? What should I do? And when you suddenly ask yourself, what is the safest thing I could do? Like you said, and you said it way more eloquently than I did. It's no longer, I'm going to do a palm strike or a front kick. It's what are all my options? And now it's an internal Socratic experience where you're coming up with a solution. And that's what we need to teach people to do, how to come up with solutions.
What, Tony, the first slogan that I ever heard that hit me in the face that you said that made so much sense was weather the ambush. That the ambush can be psychological. The ambush can be a function of visual observation. The ambush can be the suddenness and speed of an object. But there's going to be an emotional ambush. We know from the research now that whether it's a wild animal attacking me or another human being approaching me with a weapon, the same neurological systems are activated. Or if I feel suddenly disrespected, shamed, the same autonomic functions are instigated as a result of the observation through the senses of the stimulus. So that means that what's going to happen in my startle flinch impulse can be as consistent. I mean, how often has an intimate partner pissed you off and you felt the same rage as you do when someone cut you off in traffic? You can't distinguish those neurological states differently. Of course, they are different in circumstances. They are different in strategies to manage them. But the kinesiological experience, the internal experience, is the same experience, and that's because of the hard wiring.
And they both need self-awareness and self-regulation.
Yes. No one else has been doing this. In fact, it's an interesting question. Why there aren't more people speaking this language after all of this time, after all of the bludgeonings, the beatings, the adverse events, organizational embarrassment, lawsuits, human rights violations, because it's harder to do. It's harder to do. Not everybody knows how to train it. And, there's a lot of reasons probably for a different conversation.
Look what Devin just posted. This is better than therapy. We're going to send you our bill, Devin. We can give you we're going to start a monthly therapy, online therapy. You know what these conversations also do, man? If you're listening, like these conversations spark introspection. And so everyone listening deeply to this is either making notes or going, I never thought about that. And so you're evolving, your self-awareness is improving. You know, one of my favorite quotes, I use it all the time, is be willing to give up who you are today for who you could become tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the No Fear Live, is getting people on there that expose you to different ways to think about, whether it's, you know, last week I had Vinny on from the pain.
Yeah,
Academy.
it's like the 2 weeks of Italians. You have Crispini and Prisco.
Andy, let's wrap things up here. We'll have you on anytime you want to come on of something new happening. Is there something that I always ask this question? It's kind of a cliche that, you know, we're going to get off and go, "Yo, we didn't talk about this, or we didn't bring this up." Let's do something real quick. Let's talk about some of the ways people can get access to more of your research, your system, your mindset.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah.
You got tell us a little bit about Jumpstart Mastery.
Yeah, thank you. Jumpstart Mastery is a learning community that is comprised of public safety professionals, behavioral health professionals, and people in workplace violence prevention, threat assessment. We all come together to dive deep on crisis de-escalation principles that are common to all of our domains, and how do we share in our lexicon, our vocabulary, and in our education. I'll just simply say many, many, many of the major figures in this space are there, providing live learning, providing recorded learning sessions that are available digitally, workshops. You've been there, Tony, a few times, and others. Jumpstart Mastery is a provider of advanced crisis intervention training and psychiatric emergency response team training for agencies in the United States and around the world. We've done it in person. We've done it virtually. And we have one-day versions known as Verbal Craft for customer service people, everyday people who just want to bring these skills to home. And I would also say that people can be on the lookout for a new accreditation and certification board called Hope Reform, where we aim to bring meaningful, excellent standards and technical assistance to human services agencies that are not a beneficiary of any regulatory oversight. Hope Reform will be there to help you.
Elisa, pop up Andy's website again, jumpstartmastery.com for those of you in audio.
Yes.
Jumpstart, obviously jumpstartmastery, one word.com. This is the program that, lose that, there you go. This is the Spear Care program that
beautiful logo
Andy inspired us to do. Can't thank him enough. Anything else that you want to share or talk about before we wrap?
I would just say that if you have a diverse audience, people who are force users, understandably as a function of their duties, family people, fire, EMS, and I have a long history as a training captain and as a firefighter EMT, and have been on many, many, many incidents in my community. Nothing that we have been talking about here is partisan. Nothing that we have been talking about here is politically informed. The travesty of our current landscape, in my view, is that we have become polarized on principles that need not be polarized because of partisanship. Our public safety apparatus must have these skills to attend to the well-being of themselves and their communities. And our non-uniform, non-badge, non-siren agencies that are unnecessarily polarized to the presence of public safety need to get over that fast if we want to solve the problems of our world and of community and of crime and of erosion. We must work together to support people and move away from control unless control is absolutely necessary. The more your initial response is to control rather than support, the second, third, and fourth order consequences will continue to grow. That's my opinion.
I love it. I love it. I'm a fan. Can't wait to see you again live and in
Love you,
person.
Coach. Thank you for this time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you. The folks, if you would, there's a lot of people out there, people who know people. If you can't tell that both Andy and I are not just passionate about this, but obsessed about it, then you're not paying attention. All of that to say, we need your help. Share this podcast. If you've got our individual contact information, obviously, our websites have all that stuff. But if you've got somebody in any of these areas that needs the training, put them in touch with us or get them in touch vis-a-vis this. Before we sign off, I do want to talk about a couple of things. We never do this. I'm little comment here from Jay.
Hey, Jay.
Thanks.
Jay was at the first spear care class.
Nice.
Yeah, so good. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah. So for those of us on audio, Jay says, I appreciate this. It's been very helpful. This has been so helpful in our work with foster youth. Equally obsessed. Thank you.
Oh, so good. Thank you.
Wonderful. So before we sign off, gang, I want to remind you, like the No Fear program, it's if you just go to, the link is up there, getnofear.com, get the digital program and start there. If you want more, contact us. We do like Andy, corporate talks, live talks, Zoom talks. So it can be digital, it can be live, it can be in person. And the other thing we started doing 3 months ago was this new program called BTS 90, Built to Survive. It's a 90-day coaching challenge. And if you're interested in it, message us as well. If I think it's bts90@blowertactical.com, or just send us an email if you're interested in this. This is 90 days in a row. It's not AI. It's not pre-recorded. I'm coaching you for 90 days. And at the end of it, you will be more tactically fit, more situationally aware. It's built around SPEAR. It's built around the No Fear program. And it's a way, it's not just accountability. It's way beyond that. And I don't want to talk about it too much here because it can't even describe what we're doing.
Is it a Tony bot or is it you?
It's me.
Okay.
It's me. A lot of people think that it's so you go on.
Telehealth has bots. We have bots for suicide intervention, which is amazing. So I genuinely asked.
Yeah, no, I should look into that because maybe it's better than me.
Yeah. Well, it's more repeatable.
Yeah, and the bot, of course, never gets pissed off and irritated. But no, it's actually me, and people ask that. Because it's not like I'm sending you an Excel spreadsheet saying do this for 90 days, which is what a lot of online coaching is. It's very, very specific, very unique. I'm in contact every day with people, every single day through an app that we have, which is pictured there. And once a week, we get together for a live call, which is recorded if you can't make the live call. So this is a pretty amazing program. And the next one starts October 2nd. That'll be dated, but we run them every 3 months with a little break in between. But if you want to be safer, if you want to have better situational awareness, if you want to have better fear management, this is a very affordable way to change your life. And of course, the No Fear stuff and all the other programs are available on our website. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap there. Elisa said the No Fear program is on here, but I don't see it anywhere. So we'll do it another time. There we go. This was the program I was talking about before, guys. It's a 97-minute course online, and it's extremely powerful, life-changing in many ways. We had there's a couple of testimonials on our No Fear Now page. One of them was a gentleman named Andy, another Andy, who never told anyone that he was dealing with mild anxiety for 5 years. And he said to me, he did the program and he did it, I think he said something like 3 or 5 times in a week, made copious notes. and then private messaged me and said, I'd never told anyone about this, but I've had this for about 5 years now. And he asked, is it possible that my anxiety's gone after doing your program? And I made a joke that I should probably not say now, but I'm going to say it because I can't keep my mouth shut. I said, well, if I was your therapist, then the answer is no, because I want to see you next week. And,
Yeah.
and you know, and I say that because there are amazing therapists who do amazing work.
Yeah.
But like when I teach SPEAR, when I teach mindset, my goal is for you to have one session and never need me again, to give you all the tools. And if you need me again, it's because there's something deeper or you want to go deeper. But the skill in no fear is, how do you manage fear so that you have a new name tag on your polo that says Tony Blauer, Andy Prisco, fear manager? Because in life,
Yeah.
the roller coaster of life is, we are going to have fears. We need critical thinking skills so that we can apply self-awareness skill sets to go, I'm afraid of this. And if I don't manage my fear, my decisions are less predictable. They're less rational.
Tony, you have launched more people out of the harbor than anybody on that subject matter. And that's what you've brought to the world, is that you're not just giving them the skills, you're starting them on a journey that's an adventure of self-regulation and, to some extent, self-mastery. And people need help getting on that journey because they don't think, in many cases, that they don't even know where to start. And you're launching ships out into the ocean because it's not one and done. Once you start on that journey, there's no going back. It's impossible to go back.
Thank you for saying that. I'd like one more thing here. We've never done this on the show, but I said we've got to do it. Elisa, can you pop up the human weapon slide if we can? So this was about a year in the making, gang. How to defend yourself without martial arts. How's that for a clickbait headline, right? What the heck does that mean? That means that you are fully equipped, and it's kind of the proof of concept is our collaboration with your work and Spear Care, is that we're taking people who are non-martial artists and teaching them how to protect themselves and to manage the threat of and the incident of violence with as little violence as possible, and almost no violence, in that, you know, it's like you come running at me and I give you a big Swiss ball and you're like right, because it's the biological airbag intercepting the threat, and we're not escalating it, we're de-escalating it during that.
Indeed.
So those of you who are interested in any of this stuff, I just popped up a link for the No Fear. I just popped up a link for the Human Weapon System program. And you could be a black belt. You could be an instructor. This will still make you safer, because if you've listened to this conversation, there are things that we're talking about and teaching in self-regulation and de-escalation and nonviolent postures that aren't covered in traditional self-defense programs. So check out those links. You can take that down. Elisa, thanks. And Andy, thanks for staying on while I did shameless plugging for our
Oh man, this is important. It's important.
Yeah. This is a way for those of you who can't access Andy personally because of geography or finances, or just, you know, this is a way for you to start building these skills. And if you do No Fear and Human Weapon and the other stuff, and you get a chance to train with us, it's almost like Jumpstart Mastery. You're way ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
Andy, stand by in the background, and
yep, we'll do
those
it.
of you who stayed on with us, thank you. And again, please share this conversation with family, friends, and community, and we'll see you on the next call. Thanks, everybody.